Good afternoon. Welcome to this live interview of the European Training Foundation. This is our regular appointment in the framework of the Learning Connects live interviews. And this interview is being broadcast on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Today we will speak about career guidance. This month of November, we dedicate all our communication activities to Global Career Month, a joint initiative of the World Bank, European Commission, OECD, ILO, CDFOP, and ETF that aims at raising the awareness about the importance of the career guidance. And I'm happy to introduce our guest for this conversation today, Matteo Morgandi from the World Bank. Hi, Matteo, welcome.
Hello. Good morning. Good afternoon to you.
Thanks for joining. Thanks for joining, Matteo. Glenda Quintini from OECD. Hi, Glenda.
Nice to be with you. Thanks.
All right. And Florian Kadletz from the European Training Foundation. Hi, Florian.
Hello, Maria. Hello, Glenda and Matteo.
Welcome to everyone. And before we get started, I would like to invite all our followers and all people watching us live to send us where are you watching us from. We really would like to understand the geography of this live conversation. And please take part in it, making questions and comments in the chat. So first things first, we have a joint initiative of so many different organizations with so many different mandates and missions. Why did your organizations decide to focus on career guidance? Florian, let's start with you.
Hi, Maria. So, why? I mean, it's not a new topic. I think that's the first thing to say. It's not new at all. It just gets more policy attention right now because it has been accepted really widely that the transitions people face, not just from initial education and training to employment, but over their lifetime, is the new normal. We know that there is research out there in the US. It's up to 12, I think, different careers, and in the EU it's about 9, if I'm not mistaken. So we are approaching that reality. So it's the new normal, and career guidance is a useful tool to help people manage those transitions.
Glenda, why OECD believes that career guidance is important?
Well, I think what our work on career guidance stems from the work on adult learning more broadly. And what we see is actually many adults don't participate in training because they're not motivated, they don't see the value for them, they're not so interested in learning. And so career guidance, in addition to all the benefits, of course, and the importance for the transitions that Florian mentioned, is also a way of encouraging adults, making them see how training can work for them, what it can lead them, what advantages it can bring about in terms of better salaries and better job quality.
Matteo, from the World Bank perspective, why career guidance is important?
Why it's important because we see that even outside high-income countries, the level of skills and sophistication of occupation is increasing. And what we observe is that many countries are not yet prepared to help people navigate a much more sophisticated labor market than in the past. There are similar challenges to high-income countries, but there is also a lot that can be learned from them. And also, we see that this is about equity in a way. Career guidance without a public policy that helps people to embrace it is done in the family, is done in the community, and so can perpetuate patterns of choices that have lifelong consequences. And this even more so in society that are more scarce in information and data. So this is a fundamental policy that also needs to be thought of in the context of labor market policy more in general.
Thanks a lot, Matteo. I would just like to take some highs and hellos from our followers. Thanks a lot for joining us today. We have Nebosha Dubichanin, hello. Fatma from Tunisia. We have Abdikar from Turkey. We have Anisur Rahman from Bangladesh. Thanks for joining. And Rosella Stasola from Singapore. Nice geography, colleagues. So as I've mentioned, that there is this Global Careers Month, and one of the objectives is to raise the awareness about the importance of career guidance. Who said first that we need such a month, and what was behind it? Florian, maybe you can start again.
Well, it's, we have an interagency working group on career guidance, where all these organizations that you mentioned join together to work on the topic of career guidance, to develop joint statements like the one we had last year called Investing in Career Guidance. And in the framework of that network, we also decided that it makes really sense to pull our forces together and create that Global Careers Month to create awareness about the importance of the topic.
Glenda, do you want to add
Well, I
something?
don't know if there's much to add, but the point, and maybe it's worth underscoring, that was really to give also a platform for the regional career guidance association to be able to speak, so and broaden the coverage of the country. So we have regional career guidance associations from Africa, from Asia, from the Pacific, from Latin America, Europe, North America, and so on. So it's also a way to take a bottom-up approach, gather from them what are the challenges, what they're doing that's working, and then bring them up, make them more visible for the policy making.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for adding this up. Before we go to my next question, I just would like to take again a couple of hellos from you guys who are watching us live. Hi, Katrina from Ireland. It's great to have you with us. Suk from Nepal, and LinkedIn user from Malaysia. So welcome on board. Now, what the career guidance is, I really would like to start with, if possible, with listing the key success factors that contribute to the well-functioning and efficient career guidance system. Who wants to start? Because I guess it's going to be a long list, is it?
Well, I can start with some factors and then the others adds. I think one thing that immediately comes to mind, it's a guidance and advice that's provided by professionals, right? We've all got used, at least I think people in my age group, to some sort of advice provided by our teachers. And that's, of course, better than nothing, but it's still not advice from people who are at least regularly updated about the functioning of the labor market, the needs of the labor market, but that are also able to, assess the interests, the aspirations of the person, and link them to the opportunities out there. In many cases, teachers are very biased towards formal education and also towards academic education compared to other areas. So I think professional career guidance, and the same applies for adults, with clear requirements for the career guidance providers, is very important.
Glenda, may I interrupt you here? Because I think when we all think about a career guidance or career advice, we first think about our parents. Are they the best placed people to provide us career advice?
No, really, that's what Matteo, I think, was saying before, right? That in fact, because career guidance is in many places not done in the best of ways, we often rely on our families for advice, and that not only they might not be knowledgeable, but also, it perpetrates also socioeconomic differences, because the more educated, wealthier are your parents, the better career guidance you're gonna get, while if your parents are not highly educated, you're going to get much worse career guidance. And we see that, in fact, the value of career guidance plays out very highly for those who come from these advantageous socioeconomic backgrounds, because otherwise they do not have an outside option that comes from family and networks.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we've got one point on the advice should be provided by a professional, by someone who is a professional in career guidance. Florian, do you want to give us a second point? What makes a full, well-functioning career guidance system to work?
Sure. That really is at the heart of what I like to talk about, because with the ILO together, we published recently a document.
Oh, we've lost. Oh, I lost.
At the core, for me, there is the topic of cooperation and coordination. Because when we talk about the need to cater for all people in a lifelong perspective, not one single actor can deliver by itself. So we need to engage into partnerships for catering for these people. And having a national level and regional and local level cooperation coordination structure in place is really another key element.
Thanks a lot, Florian. Thanks. Even if we had some technical issues, I think your point is super important. Matteo, do you want to add something to what Florian just said?
Sure. I think one of the aspects that is not trivial is you need the data for a good career guidance to be of quality, and that in itself it's a huge policy and challenge, but very important, right? So I would say a career guidance system combines a certain emphasis on tools that allow people to understand themselves, to understand their preferences, their attitudes, and try to make this set of information dialogue with what the market provides in terms of opportunities and of education system in terms of linking that to the market as well. So a good career guidance system is the one that allows the user to understand this complex information in a digestible way so that they can make informed decisions. And that in itself is an art, and we see really different countries doing it in different way, but always the good data, the good interface with people, and the combination of personal characteristics and attitudes with the market, I think are all three very important to make this work well.
Thanks a lot, Matteo. Glenda, do you want to follow up with the next point? What makes a proper, fully functioning career guidance system to work? Glenda.
Yes, and actually links well with what Matteo was saying. I think it's what we find in our research is also that drawing up a personalized career guidance plan improves the likelihood, the probability of finding a job or being in training 6 months after career guidance. And this is very close to what Matteo was saying, in the sense that you have to be able to see the person, to assess in a formalized way, at least what skills they have, where are the skill gaps, where are those skills best used in terms of labor market opportunities, and then be able to do something really personalized. I think this is important also because a lot of career guidance at the moment is provided in a passive way through portals. I mean, there are portals that are better than others, but in general, you are alone facing the information about where you're going. But there are few ways that you can actually assess where you stand. And so being able to speak to a person, or at least have a way of linking what you can already do with where you're going, is very important.
Because Glenda, usually when we think about career guidance, we think about these typical interest tests, a bit old-fashioned way. And when you speak to people about career guidance, first thing they think of is, okay, I will be tested in a lot of different occasions. Is that the modern approach to career guidance, or there is more to that?
Unfortunately, a lot of career guidance is not doing that. I mean, that doesn't mean necessarily that that's the best way to go about. I think it depends on the test and how they're assessing you. But the truth is that in many cases, there is no real attention paid to what the person can do, to recognizing what they might have acquired outside education, with what skills they possess relative to the job they would like to go to. In many cases, it's actually, again, a passive transmission of information, and sometimes it's not even good information, as Matteo was saying. So I don't think it's necessarily done that way. But I think trying again to understand the aspirations, the capabilities of the person is important.
Thanks a lot, Glenda. Florian, can you give us another element of a well-functioning career guidance system?
Yeah, when I was listening to my colleagues, one thing that is really overlooked in many countries when we reviewed now 10 countries, is the topic of funding. And it's really a key area, because career guidance is a cross-sectorial topic. Nobody owns it. Everybody is responsible for it. So nobody is paying for it in the end. And then it often is money for public employment services only, or some money for schools, but it's not enough. And funding is really a key element. And it also relates to the topic that was mentioned about data, and that refers to monitoring the evaluation. If I don't know the input, it's very hard to look at how effective I was. And part of the input is also funding. So it's very important to have that in mind.
But who in theory should fund the career guidance? Is it fully public expenditure? Maybe Matteo, I can see that you're smiling. Can you clarify this? Who shall publish fund the career guidance?
I think largely career guidance is a public good in the sense that it requires so much coordination and effort. And I think what Florian is saying is essential. It needs its own intentional financing. Even if all the building blocks are there, there is an extra mile that needs to be done with a focus on career guidance, even when you have a labor market information system, for instance, which is also what Glenda was mentioning as a portal. There are some portals, right? But there, and this is an intentional policy that, in my view, should be co-owned by at least labor ministries and education ministries, and with a lot of interest from finance and economy ministries in a way, because the career guidance is also about efficiency. It's about not having people join degrees that are not going to bring a return to the social investment that the whole society is making on education, for instance. So everybody, it's an intervention that has a cost, but the benefits are actually much probably better. I don't know to what extent it's been done as a cost benefit, but really we know the cost of people doing the wrong choices, right? So that justifies public expenditure for it.
Thanks a lot, Matteo. Before going to my next question, I would like first of all to sum up what we've said just now. So the elements of successful, well-functioning system of career guidance, and you colleagues add if I forget something. So advice should be provided by a professional career advisor. There should be data that the policies should base themselves on. There should be partnership between different stakeholders that also are owners, some of them, of the process. There should be proper funding, mostly public, and there should be cooperation between different ministries, bodies, and all of that. Is that right, colleagues? Am I missing something in this equation?
No, I think it's fine. There's just one element to highlight in particular, I think, because it needs to be made explicit. It's the topic of access. And it's true. I mean, offering an office with certain office hours is fine and important, but there are so many we don't reach through those traditional ways, services we offer, the vulnerable groups, not in education, training, or employment, youth. Those kind of people, it needs more, it needs outreach. So we need to actively ensure access, actually. So,
thanks a lot. That's an important point. So it should be, the career guidance should be accessible to all, younger generation, unemployed, older generation, for reskilling, upskilling, and all this part of important work. Now, before I'll go to my next question, I just would like to welcome people that have just joined us. Hello, Matteo from Berlin, Rasa from Pakistan, Malik Hassan says hello, hi, it's great to have you. Inga Satyashvili from Georgia, Lumni from Kosovo. Colleagues and followers, just send us your questions. If you want to participate in this conversation, if you want to make questions to one of our speakers, please feel free to do so in the chat. So we've described more or less the elements of the successful career guidance. But now, when do you believe career guidance should actually start? What is the perfect age when we have to show to our kids, or maybe adults, on the career, on the job market that is waiting for them? Who wants to start? Glenda, I see that you're nodding.
I'm nodding yes, but no, my point is not much when we start, but I do think that there is an important link between doing career guidance well for young people and career guidance for adults, right? So if you give young people good career guidance, it's really helpful for them. In addition to helping them, you're also showing them the value of it, and so they will be more likely to access it as adults. So I certainly think that you don't start career guidance for adults when they're adults already, that you start earlier. But then I'm not an expert of career guidance for children or younger people, so maybe Florian or Matteo want to add something about
Glenda,
what
before we
age.
pass the floor to other speakers, one follow-up question. Do you believe, and then actually I will also ask it to Matteo and Florian, do you believe that there is a link between efficient career guidance working in a country and lower unemployment rate amongst younger generation? Is there a link? So the more efficient you are providing career guidance, the less likely it is that young people will remain unemployed.
Well, yes, I think, and it's not just about employment. So, first of all, of course, you're informing young people of what are the jobs that are emerging, what are the skills they need to develop to find employment later. But I think it's also a matter of job quality. We see a lot of mismatch in the labor market. So, a lot of young people who are overqualified for jobs, a lot who are mismatched by field of study. So, overqualified means I have a university degree, but I'm working in a call center, for example, or I have a degree in psychology, but I'm actually working as a secretary because I couldn't find a job as a psychologist. So I think those tend to reduce. Well, of course, have a negative impact on wages, but they also reduce job satisfaction. They also mean that people are less productive at work, less satisfied with their job. So I think so. It's not just about the fact that they get a job, but they also will be by studying the right thing, let's say, or studying something, being informed about what the options out there. They'll also more likely to get a job. That's
in fact, in the chat there is a question from Katrina, from one of our followers, saying, is there a data supporting the link between efficient career guidance and the levels of unemployment? Do any of you know, or do you any has this data?
I think it's very hard to follow people long enough that you can see from when they receive career guidance to what happens on the labor market. And actually, we asked adults about adults may also mean young people. In general, it means people who are not in education. The problem there is that career guidance is a very qualitative concept. So we find that a lot of adults do not necessarily attribute a positive outcome they achieve, like in employment or education, to career guidance. So they can tell us that after they've accessed career guidance, 6 months later they had a job or they went onto a training. They don't necessarily make the direct link between the two. So
it's difficult to establish that link. So I'm coming back to my previous question to you, Matteo. When do you believe career guidance should start, ideally?
Well, I think it depends on the country in a way. Career guidance should start as early as when decisions make a difference, right? So, for instance, in many respects, career guidance starts with educational decisions, and in some countries, educational decisions start with the parents. In a way, parents are the stakeholders, not just the future workers. Especially in countries that do early tracking, for instance, in countries where vocational training decisions are already affecting your lifelong choices. I think that's where having already some information matters. Even thinking of my country, Italy, there is now really good data about school level outcomes in terms of graduation rates and how many people continue to university, what is their degree, what is their grades in university based on what the school they did before. None of that controls for the selection issues, but what I am shocked always when I go home is how little students and teachers are aware of these resources. So in a way, part of career guidance, in my view, should start in school. And especially in a developing country setting, this is probably the last massive public policy in place before people go on their own in society. Employment services are just very rare. And unless you learn young that there are these resources out there so that when you need them again, you go back to them, is much less likely that you go back to them when you need them. So I think, in my view, career decision-making and educational decision-making should be something that is part of the educational curriculum before people leave school, so that at least they learn what are the things to look out for, right? They might not need the decisions at the moment, but that's the last time we can catch people in mass, I would say.
So inclusion into the school curriculum, that's what I take from your answer, Matteo. And I would like just to ask my colleague Florian. Florian, when do you believe career guidance should start?
Well, in line with what was said before, but with a slightly different focus, I would say as early as possible as well. But for me, the main argument is because the things that we try to help people, young people develop, it's not knowledge, it's skills, it's career management skills, and this relates to much more than CV writing or how to behave in an interview. It's really about personal development, positive youth development. It's about social emotional learning. And this is something you cannot do in one-off information sessions or in a 1 year's course. It takes over years. The second reason why it should be very early to intervene is because you really reach whole generations, and that's really a positive impact you can make.
In fact, Florian, what you're saying is pretty much in line with what we just received from our follower, Monia Mgribi, that says that, don't you think that career guidance should start as soon as possible for students before they make choices in the schooling path, so that they choose wisely and do not settle? So career guidance is not only about career, but also about choosing further learning and further educational opportunities.
Yeah, that's exactly the point. Traditionally, the idea was let's give them at transition points the right information based on their interest. You inform them about the 10 matching occupations and then the matching educational pathways to choose a career for a lifetime, which is not wrong by itself, but it needs much more. Yeah, it needs more, and the more is simply needed because if people leave education and move into the world of employment, and they will face difficult situations, like the first transition to employment is already different, and the following as well. It is not your capacity to write a CV that makes you survive. It is your personal maturity that makes you manage that difficult transition. And for that, we need to extend education from an academic learning place to a place where you learn also life skills. And that's why we need to merge the life skills learning with the career management skills development.
And just to add to what you are saying, we just received a message from Raza Abba saying career guidance for students start in schools as early as possible. It varies to each country, so true. In our South Asian context, it is grade 8. But Floyd, I think once you gave me an example that in Poland, they started even in kindergarten. Is that right?
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
So even
No, it's
earlier.
yeah. In Poland, it's a very nice structure. Take a look at the CEDEFOP inventory for career guidance on the Careers Net. You have it described there. Poland really starts in the kindergarten in a structured way and moves on through whole out the education system. But we also have very nice examples from other countries. Serbia starts very early in primary school. We have Ukraine, who integrated right before the war yet career guidance into the national state standards for primary, and they would actually continue now with secondary. We have it in other countries like Armenia, Albania. So it's not something that only a few do. I think many understood the importance of it.
Thanks a lot for that. Now, talking about the present challenges, in the context of the current economic crisis induced by first COVID pandemic and then the Russian aggression in Ukraine, and the likelihood of the economic recession in many countries in the EU and beyond, how important the career guidance will be to find our way through this crisis? Glenda.
It's a tricky question because I think career guidance is conceived and suited to address more structural changes than, to the extent that a crisis can bring about a change in what is required on the labor market, what jobs are emerging. Certainly career guidance can help. So you could argue, for example, that the COVID crisis did highlight further or accelerate the digital transition. You could say that maybe the current energy crisis and also the COVID crisis together, they also gave new impetus to the green transition. So we hear a lot more now than we did before. So in a way, career guidance can help channel existing skills or choices of young people towards these sectors, facilitate the transitions by providing advice. Yes, that's my thought on this.
Matteo, do you want to follow up? So with the all economics playing against us, how career guidance can help?
Well, one thing we know about crises is that they tend to hit more specific groups, right? And one of the typical groups that bears the cost of a crisis is the one who are about to enter the labor market. And of course, I think Glenda's point is important because career guidance is about making decisions that don't have a repercussion in the very short term, right? Usually you choose an education and then you study for it. And so it's not that easy to use it. But career guidance is very connected to the world of labor intermediation in a way. There is a short-term there is a short-term dimension to that in the sense that some people, when a crisis is starting, they might also make a decision that they postpone entering in the labor market, and then instead they try to focus on some short-term training that is very much in demand in the market at the moment, and helps them to navigate that very first difficult year that usually in crisis is the one that is hardest for young people to break through because few employers are hiring. So finding the industries where this is not a problem because there is still demand, and finding out whether there is any short-term training that allows you to put a foot in the door, I think it's still a valid thing to try. And so having a good information system behind your career services that allows you to identify what are the professions that could be learned with not a huge investment of time, for instance, in the basic digital skills, right? Or in the intermediate digital skills, if people already have the basic ones. This type of thing, I think, in crisis time can help to some extent.
Thanks a lot. Florian, I saw that you were nodding.
Yeah. I mean, I of course fully agree with what was said by Glenda and Matteo. An interesting element, maybe, because we hear a lot from working with the partner countries.
With EU
That
neighboring countries, if I may.
Yes, sure. With the countries in the EU neighborhood and Central Asian countries, that you know, career guidance was developed as a system, in a very structured labor market, but it's not necessarily only useful in such a context. It is also very useful in a context where there is high informality or where jobs are getting where people get jobs because of contacts and reputation and family ties and so on. So I think adapting the approach to career guidance to context is a crucial element we need to consider, and adapting it also to the reality of the people. So that might be that you have to involve other stakeholders when you guide young people, not just parents, but maybe elders in the family. It might mean that you actually inform about informal opportunities to move out from school. So I think that that's another important element to mention, and it relates to your question of how it can play a role in a difficult labor market and situation. And we can learn a lot from countries like India or India is a very good example actually, where they have a good approach
Why is it a good example, Florian?
because they have an official active approach towards the informal sector. And that's really something very interesting to learn from. And sometimes we, in the EU neighborhood, we tend to take approaches from the EU and try to implement them there because they work in the EU. But that might not be the best way forward.
Now, I think both Glenda and Matteo, you've mentioned this, also digital transition that is coming and changes happening faster, and the labor market will be affected heavily by digitalization, new technologies, AI, and all the new tech that is coming. How can we make sure that career guidance will change as quickly as the labor market does, so it provides the advice that is relevant for the labor market? Is there a way? Do you see a recipe that we could develop actually to help career guidance to change as fast as the labor market?
Well,
Glenda.
I think Matteo was talking about skills assessment and anticipation before, right? So basically, this is the way countries try to predict or foresee how skill requirements are changing. So I think one way, and it's already happening in many countries, is to channel that information to career guidance providers. So that's one aspect of career guidance changing, in the sense of keeping up to speed with the faster and faster changes we're observing in the labor market. The other aspect is to use technology for career guidance, right? So to use technology to the advantage of other learning in general, but career guidance. So we've got we did look into it very recently, and there are many innovative ways to provide career guidance. Of course, face-to-face is always better than career guidance or face-to-face in the sense of personalized career guidance is still better than AI provided, but at the same time it does allow to reduce the number of people who need advice, so that the counselors can focus on those who actually need in-person or personal support. So I think you have to see both sides, how technology can help and how career guidance can keep up with it.
Matteo, do you have anything to add? How do we make sure that career guidance is as flexible and as fast changing as the labor market?
I would say Florian's point before was very relevant. So career guidance in part is about teaching people the skills to do career management, right? And in part that also means teaching people what type of indicators to look at when you look at an educational program, when you look at a job, when you look at a professional. And then once these skills are acquired, which is in itself requires a certain time and practice, then I think the best is really to rely on digital information. So I think the individualized approach is very important, especially to help the person take advantage of the tools. But ideally, you don't want to completely substitute the person, because they will need that over time. And then how career guidance can remain up to date is really about the quality of the information that feeds the system. And so they're having a good grip on the formal labor market, being able to complement that with information on the informal labor market, to the extent that employer surveys are possible, to also anticipate things you don't see in the data yet, and how to put all these things together. That's a bit the art of a self-updating career systems. What's important, I think, is that when government develop career guidance systems, I'm thinking also like typical of World Bank projects, right? So we finance for a period of time a certain public policy. What's important is that there is a substantial institutional capacity to maintain it. Otherwise, the systems go outdated very quickly. So I think that having a regular budget for that is actually very important, not just an upfront investment to build these systems.
Yeah, and like that, you make sure that there is a sustainable result also obtained if you have a financial and institutional capacity. Florian, over to you. So how can we make sure, again, the same question, how we make sure that career guidance would change in line with the fast changing labor market? Do you have any key tips?
Well, for me, that relates back to your very first question on the system setup, and it's a governance question also for me, because when you work together at the national level with all the relevant stakeholders, including representatives of practitioners, including social partners, the ministries, in certain countries also donor organizations. So if you have that network of partners working regularly together, it is not something you would overlook, because it's a natural thing that you adapt the services, the policies to the needs. That's why it's so important to have that national forum or national working group in any way set up well. So that's one thing I wanted to say. And briefly to Matteo, I like a lot the World Bank cooperation that was ongoing in Kazakhstan. And it's a very interesting example actually of public, private, and donor intervention. And they developed a very beautiful thing called the Atlas of Professions. And it's really a good practice in my view. It's a very good online portal that puts together information about the labor market, about the education system, offers very interesting insights for individuals, so clients, to learn from what is out there for me. And it also provides information for career guidance practitioners and policymakers. So it's really a very nice example, and it's sustainable in addition. One more point on digitalization, maybe. It is really an opportunity that we've seen in the 10 reviews that we've done in Eastern European and Western Balkan countries to put together fragmented services. So you have a lot of services in education, in employment, in youth, and digitalization can help bring those services together to allow clients and professionals to enter into one entry point information website or tool that provides you information or support. And I think that is really a potential not used yet by many, but it's the direction in which countries develop that I see.
So the fragmentation that is due to the fact that career guidance is somewhere in between Ministry of Education, Ministry of Labor, Ministry of Finance, the one that mentioned Matteo as well, that this digitalization and creation of common space online can actually solve that fragmentation and help to arrive to the end users. Correct?
Well, solve it can be a very important milestone to take that step. It will not solve the problem by itself. It needs additional effort, in terms of coordination, having a national group, regional groups, etc. But digitalization can really help overcome fragmentation, achieve cost efficiency, be more effective. Yeah.
And thanks a lot actually for the two examples that you gave about Atlas of Profession from Kazakhstan. And we have one follower saying Atlas of Profession, thanks for sharing, from Raza Abbas. And then Katrina from Ireland saying, because you mentioned, Florian, the Indian example and how they take on board the informal economy. She says the informal approach is very important and used often in Ireland. We are in the EU. So that's thanks a lot, Katrina, for that comment. Also, we have just received another one saying that I wonder whether collaboration with employers and putting in place systems that ensure they feed into the content in a structured way could help address the challenges of the relevance of career guidance. So do you believe that cooperation with employers is really one of the keys to make sure career guidance works properly? I see most of you nodding. Glenda.
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, employers are, in our view, they should be involved already in developing the information that feeds into career guidance. So they should be part of that assessment of how skills are changing. They know very well what is changing for them in the jobs that they have in their own companies and sectors. They are also well placed to provide information about where there are training gaps that can fill those skill changes. So that's one first role. There's also a role for employers to provide guidance and career support, I would call it, themselves. Of course, employers can only generally provide career advice for growth within their company or within their sector. So obviously it needs to be complemented, but there are some countries that already impose that there is some sort of career conversations that happen. For example, in France, there's an obligation that there has to be a career interview, I think it's called, every 2 years. In Japan, for example, which is a country where, although things are changing, typically people stay in the same job in the same company for a lifetime. So they've put a lot of emphasis on career guidance within the company. So they've actually developed, the government has developed a platform, a kind of an instrument that people can use to navigate job opportunities, assess their skills, whether they can move to openings in other departments, for example, and so on. And it's meant for use internally in companies. So certainly there is a key role there to play for employers.
Mm-hmm. Thanks a lot. Matteo, do you want to follow up on the role of employers in the career guidance?
Well, I think employers have also a role in in the sense that they have to collaborate if they want a good quality career guidance system in developing the information, right? So part of employers' role is really about participating in the initiatives that try to collect from employers the intelligence that is required that feed this information into prospective users of the service. There are some countries where employers almost take the lead in developing some of the skills taxonomy, some of the because maybe the government is not doesn't have the capacity or doesn't have it as a priority, and employers understand that it's a priority. Often at the sectoral level, maybe not for the whole economy, but employers in certain sectors actually take the lead in even developing a number of tools. I'm thinking, for instance, in the case of Brazil, where private training institutions that are funded with a public levy actually have a huge and well-developed career guidance system because they have such an interest in getting people to make the right choices for their company. So I think it depends also on institutionality, but certainly they have a role that without them it's just very hard to have a piece of the puzzle, which is the information.
Thanks a lot, Matteo. Very interesting, and I'm really enjoying the fact that we're giving examples of good practices from all over the world, from Japan to Kazakhstan, from France to Brazil. So this is really, really amazing. So Florian, yes, there is one question in the chat coming from Ireland, from Katrina, about the Atlas of Professions. We will follow up with you, and we can share with you the link.
Yeah, we'll share it later.
Yeah, super. So Florian, the role of employers for the career guidance.
Yeah, I of course agree fully with what was said before. There is one more element I wanted to add, and it relates to what I said before about early learning of career management skills in the wider understanding. And when it's about learning about myself, who am I, as one aspect about that learning process. The second one is learning about the world of work. It's not just about learning about what occupations are available right now. It's also developing a critical understanding of the world of work. What is the impact of economy on the environment is part of that as well as what is the impact on me and my personal rights if I'm in the informal sector, or what are my labor rights. And that's why I find it very interesting to add next to the employers, which is super important, also the role of unions. I know many argue they have a declining role, but at the same time, they are still a huge representative of a huge group of people. And I find it very enriching that I talked recently to a representative from the International Trade Union Confederation, and they person informed me that in Australia they are officially a member at school career guidance, and that I find very interesting, and because it allows the young people to get the other view. And that is enriching, and I think an important. So just to add, and obviously, I mean, the employer plays a huge role also in making young people gain really real life experience on what does it mean to, I don't know, be a carpenter or be in a hospital, etc., etc.
Florian, we have another question, just a quick follow-up. So Glenda provided examples on successful cooperation with employers from Japan and France. Matteo mentioned Brazil. From EU neighboring countries, can you give us some successful examples of how the employers were involved as an important stakeholder and took part in the shaping of career guidance? Apart from Kazakhstan, which you mentioned it, I think that's a good...
There are a couple of countries, obviously, where social partners are involved. Like, for example, if I'm not fully wrong now, the standards for career guidance that had been developed in Serbia were also developed by social partners. There was a huge stakeholder group. But I have to say the reviews that we've did has shown that social partners have a very, very limited role so far. I mean, employers are involved when it comes to school guidance, but to a certain extent, but really shaping career guidance I don't see that they are strongly involved, at least in the countries we reviewed.
Thanks a lot, Florian. Before we end this streaming, there is another very last question that just came from Rosella Stasola. Glenda mentioned how socioeconomic differences affect the quality of career guidance young people receive from parents in their early background. Which ways do you think are most effective to overcome the barrier on access to information about opportunities out there? Glenda, do you want to take it?
Well, I'll start, but I think career guidance is in itself already partly a solution, because especially if it's government provided or provided at school, right? Because the point is that everybody gets the same information. So whether you have a good network through your parents, whether your parents are highly educated professionals or not, you get the same information. So that's the first thing that comes to mind. So career guidance is meant to overcome that. And I was thinking of something else, but I'll leave it's gone. I need to come back. In the meanwhile, the others can chip in.
Sure. So as we said, that one of the necessary elements of the career guidance at the very beginning of the successful career guidance is the access to it. So the full and equal access. Yes, Glenda.
Yeah, it's come back. No, the other thing I wanted to say was the cost, of course. I mean, in countries where, because we discussed before on the question about how do we finance career guidance, who should pay for it, etc. And one important thing is that in some countries, unfortunately, career guidance is not government provided. So when it's government provided, sometimes it's free from the start. But in some countries, for example, in Latin America, we found through a survey that we carried out, but also in Australia, career guidance is provided by coaches. Call them as you like. There's a wide range of names: career guidance counselors, coaches, etc. They're private professionals. Sometimes, if we're lucky, there are actually ways to. There's qualification requirements and so on, but they are private providers, and so people have to pay for career guidance, and of course that creates another discriminating factors between those who have the ability to pay and those who don't. So I think the element of cost, where career guidance is not provided by the state by public employment services or schools and so on, I think is very important as well.
Mm-hmm. Thanks a lot. And my very last question, and I will ask my speakers to be super short. So imagine we have in front of the computer, looking at us right now, a youngster, and they're about to finish their studies. And they have to decide about the future, where to go, what to do. What would be your one message to them? Florian, let's start with you.
Research. Talk to people. That means not just friends, but also professionals.
Matteo.
I would say research. I think that's right, and talk to people who are almost at the end of the journey you're thinking about starting. Okay, so if you are choosing that school, don't talk to your friend who started 6 months ago. Talk to the guy who's about to finish and what he's facing and what are his regrets and what he wishes he knew and whether you think the school was good at all. So I think this is so important, right? That they ask our youth, but who are a bit more further along in the journey. I think that's very important.
Interesting tip. Thank you so much, Matteo. Glenda, what would be your advice to the youngsters?
Well, I think I would tell them, follow your aspirations. I'm thinking of my children now, but I would tell them, please do science, maths, engineering, technology. That's very important. It will serve you well. So that's they have given a more intellectual, a more philosophical answer. I'm more practical.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Glenda. I would like to thank all of our speakers for this very interesting and insightful conversation. Thanks a lot to Matteo Morgandi from World Bank. Thanks a lot, Matteo, for coming and being with us today. Thanks a lot to Glenda Quintini from OECD. Thanks a lot, Glenda, for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot to Florian from ETF.
Thanks a lot.
And thanks a lot also to Susan and Dominique, who are the technical producers behind the scene of this broadcast. So thanks a lot for your help. I would like also to invite all of our followers to have a look at the latest podcast that ETF produced. which is about career guidance. We spoke to a real career advisor who gave some really amazing tips on how to do the career advice and what is the best way to find your way through the circumstances. And thanks again to everyone, and thanks to our followers. Stay tuned because there is much more to come. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks.